Hi, my name is Lydia Pearce and I'm a barrister from Broadway House Chambers.
My name's Ella Embleton and I'm also a criminal barrister at Broadway House Chambers.
Today's video is going to be looking at deepfake porn. We're going to be looking at the BBC film Another Body and the UK law now and possible law in the future. So this is inspired by the award-winning documentary film Another Body, which is currently available to stream on the BBC iPlayer. And it's also going to look at where the law is now regarding deepfake porn and where the law may potentially go into the future. This content is correct at the time of recording. It's taken from Blackstone's and it's taken from the Criminal Justice Bill Notice of Amendments on the 13th of May 2024, although we are going to deal with the fact that there has now been a dissolution of Parliament. This is not legal advice, and if you need legal advice for your personal situation, please contact a solicitor. And of course, if you are a solicitor with a case concerning deepfake technology, please contact our clerks.
This is the second part of our series of content exploring where popular culture and criminal law intersect. If you haven't seen our previous video about baby reindeer and the law on stalking, then please check that out. So let's look at some recent developments before deep diving into our main subject.
Operation Early Dawn was triggered across the whole country on Wednesday, the 15th of May this year. Operation Early Dawn orders courts to hold defendants in police cells until prison beds become available where they are not, with the measures affecting defendants who are already being held on remand and are awaiting a bail hearing. This is an emergency measure to address overcrowding of jails in England and Wales, and it means it's more likely that defendants awaiting trial will be on bail rather than on remand.
This comes hot on the heels of worries around the early release scheme, which was rolled out late last year, with the aim being to free up prison spaces. It initially involved inmates having their sentences cut by up to 18 days. That was then increased to between 35 and 60 days in March and rose again from the 23rd of May to 70 days.
So that scheme is actually separate from the home detention curfew scheme, in which prisoners can apply to be released early from their prison sentences if they go on home detention, so a tag monitored curfew. The maximum amount of time that a prisoner can serve on home detention is 180 days, and that was applicable from June last year. There are criteria to be eligible for home detention curfew, including the sentence must be one of under 4 years, and some groups are excluded, including sex offenders who are required to register, and offenders serving extended sentences for violence and sexual offences. Prisoners have to have served at least 14 days from their date of sentence before they can apply for release with a home detention curfew. Please comment below on any subjects in popular culture or developments in criminal law that you would like us to look into in the future. So moving on to our subject for today, deepfake porn and criminal law in England and Wales. And let's start off by understanding what we mean by deepfake porn.
So deepfake videos are usually AI-generated augmented videos, which appear to show someone doing or saying something, but they aren't real. This can be done with a face swap, so the underlying real footage has a different face mapped onto it, and the original actions and sounds stay the same. Or it can include an AI-generated impersonation, which is potentially impossible to distinguish from the real person, and lip movements which sync with what the voice is saying.
So deepfakes of the more sophisticated type, so that's where the voice and the video are fake, have been used in the past to create false videos of politicians. The most infamous example of recent times is a deepfake video of Volodymyr Zelensky, which was circulated in the early days of the Ukraine war. That video appeared to show the Ukrainian president telling his country people to surrender. Now, when I say it was sophisticated, that actual example was quite poor quality for a deepfake video.
For a higher quality example, look up deepfake Obama. This is almost indistinguishable from the real video, and the technology is advancing at such a pace that very soon it will be impossible to tell the difference between a deepfake video and a real video just from watching it.
Now, when it comes to deepfake porn, there appear to be two types prevalent at the moment, what we're going to call face swapping and what we're going to call nudifying. So face swapping porn is deepfake porn where you have an original porn video that is used, and then the complainant's face is mapped onto the porn actor's face, whilst keeping the porn actor's body, actions, and voice the same. This can be done to a very high level, where the maker has some level of technical knowledge, software, and skills. Deepfake porn videos can be generated by such a user with such equipment, or they can be commissioned and paid for. Again, this can be relatively accessible and low cost. There are also face swapping apps available which can do the same job, albeit to a lower quality. Those are available easily and on your phone for little or no cost, and the quality of these is rapidly improving.
Nudifying is where a bot or an app can be used to strip naked any photograph of a clothed woman uploaded. This is not difficult to find and can be done either for free with a wait time and watermarks, or for only $1. It can be turned around instantly on your phone. The technology on these apps is advanced, although not so advanced yet that it will nudify photographs of men. If you attempt to nudify a photograph of a man, it will give them breasts and female genitalia. One of the nudifying websites had 38 million hits in the first 8 months of 2021.
So if you want to get a really good handle on this subject and the impact on complainants, the award-winning documentary film Another Body, My AI Porn Nightmare is currently available on the BBC iPlayer under their Storyville banner. We will be discussing that film in this episode, so there will be spoilers. The film follows Taylor, which is not her real name, a 22-year-old engineering student who discovers that her face has been deepfake imposed onto hardcore porn. These films have been uploaded onto popular porn websites, shared by a page set up using her name, which lists her details, the town she lives in, and where she attends college. The films are realistic. Now, when watching that particular film, we know how convincing and realistic deepfake porn can be, because the filmmakers have used the same technology to deepfake an actress's face over Taylor's face. And if you hadn't been told that 10 minutes into watching the film, I don't think you'd have known that you were watching a deepfake.
Taylor goes to the police, albeit it is in the United States. And whilst they are sympathetic, it simply isn't a crime. And there's nothing they can really do to help her. Taylor, who is a talented engineering student, does her own digging and discovers that the same person who shared the deepfakes of her had also done the same to her classmates. And through their own collective research, these female engineers work out who it is. This was all orchestrated by a man who they had been friends with, who appears to have deepfaked them out of revenge towards them, as they were not as close to him as he had perhaps wanted. They also discovered the corners of 4chan, where makers and customers of deepfakes interact and place orders.
The film came out in 2023, and we don't know the timeline of the actual events and when they were supposed to have happened, but I suspect it's relatively recent due to the technology involved. But the film does end with some statistics that deepfakes are doubling every 6 months, and the researchers predict that there will be over 5.2 million in 2024, and 90% of those are non-consensual porn of women. So Ella, what was some of the personal impact that being deepfaked had on Taylor?
It had a massive impact on her. She was a student midway through her education at the time and was looking to the future and applying for jobs. But whenever someone Googled her name, the fake porn and the porn channels dedicated to her would come up. She was afraid to go out, to socialise and to date because her personal details had been added to the porn sites that hosted those videos. There were internet forums in which she and the porn were discussed in abusive terms. In short, she couldn't escape it, and it had a massive negative impact on her.
Now, at the end of the film, we learn that Taylor has been invited to address the White House on deepfake porn, as they are considering how to legislate in this area. So, Ella, where in England and Wales are we right now with legislation on deepfake porn?
So the Online Safety Act of 2023 criminalised revenge porn and criminalised the sharing of deepfake porn images by inserting new offences into the Sexual Offences Act of 2003. Section 66A deals with what is commonly known as cyberflashing, so sending pictures of genitals. Section 66A, subsection 1, sets out that a person who intentionally sends or gives a photograph or film of any person's genitals to another person commits an offence if they did that with the intention that the person receiving the image, seeing the genitals, would be caused alarm, distress, or humiliation, or that the person sending or giving the photograph does so for the purposes of gaining sexual gratification and is reckless as to whether the person receiving the image or video will be caused alarm, distress, or humiliation. And so it sets out what it means to send or give another person a photograph. So you could send a photograph or film electronically, showing it to another person. So, for example, if I show you my phone, that would be committing the offence, or placing it in a particular area for a person to find. And when the Act talks about a photograph or film, that can include an image, whether made or altered by computer graphics or in any other way which appears to be a photograph or film, a copy of a photograph or film as set out as what I've already mentioned, and any data which is stored that's capable of being converted into a photograph or film. And so that reference to the images that are altered by computer graphics means that someone who cyberflashes with a deep fake or a computer generated image will still commit the offence, which is great, but the primary intention behind cyberflashing law was to prevent the sending of unsolicited nude pictures, which have historically tended to be of male genitalia. We have already learned that nudifying apps don't work on male bodies, and that 90% of deepfake material is deepfake porn made of women. In fact, one study actually put that figure as 96%. So whilst it is good that cyberflashing includes deepfake porn, the more likely scenario complainants in deepfake cases will encounter is the same as Taylor in another body, which is what we are coming on to next.
So Section 66B of the Sexual Offences Act deals with what is known as revenge porn. The legislation is written so that this not only covers the showing of actual intimate photographs of films or films of the complainant, but also deepfake images and films. So the legislation states that sharing or threatening to share an intimate photograph or film under Section 66B, subsection 1, a person commits an offence if they intentionally share a photograph or film which shows or appears to show another person B in an intimate state, B does not consent to the sharing of that photograph or film, and A does not reasonably believe that B consents. Person A can also commit an offence if they intentionally share a photo of that type and does so with the intention of causing B alarm, distress, or humiliation, and B does not consent to the sharing of the photograph or film. They can also commit the offence if they share such photograph or film for the purposes of themselves, so the person sharing, obtaining sexual gratification, where B, the complainant, does not consent to the sharing of the photograph or film, and A does not reasonably believe that they consent. It can also be committed where A threatens to share a photograph or film of that type, and they do so with the intention that B or another person who knows B will fear that the threat will be carried out, or being reckless as to whether B or another person who knows B will fear that the threat will be carried out.
So there are actually 4 ways in which someone can commit this offence. Sharing where there is no consent and no reasonable belief in consent. Sharing with the intention to cause alarm, distress, or humiliation and without consent. Thirdly, sharing for their own or another's sexual gratification without consent and without reasonable belief in consent. And finally, threats to share with the intention that the complainant or someone who knows the complainant will fear that the threat is carried out, or that they are reckless as to whether the complainant or person who knows them would fear that the threat will be carried out. Section 66D clarifies what a photograph of film of someone in an intimate state would show. So these can include a person participating or engaging in an act which a reasonable person would consider to be sexual, that the person doing a thing which a reasonable person would consider to be sexual, all or part of a person's exposed genitals, buttocks, or breasts. Fourthly, the person in an act of urination or defecation. And finally, the person carrying out an act of personal care associated with a person's urination, defecation, or genital or anal discharge.
The legislation also confirms that the definition of a film or photograph for revenge porn is the same as it is for cyber flashing, that it includes an image, whether made or altered by computer graphics or in any other way, which appears to be a photograph or film. So that covers deepfake porn, whether it is the face swap or the nudifying type. A defendant convicted of an offence of sharing an intimate image without consent only could be tried summarily and receive the maximum term for summary offences, which is currently 6 months. All the other offences are either way, and the maximum sentence is 2 years custody.
This came into force on the 31st of January of this year, so it's really recent law. Although disclosing or threatening to disclose private sexual photographs or films with the intention to cause distress and without the complainant's consent was already an offence under Section 33 of the Criminal Justice and Courts Act of 2015, and that act was repealed and superseded by the new legislation.
So the new offences are much wider than that previous offence, in that it covers real and computer-generated images. And there is also no longer the requirement to prove intent to cause distress in order to prove an offence.
So, what are the possible defences under the current law? Well, consent would be a defence to sharing a deepfake image of a complainant. And the Act clarifies that consent to the sharing of a photograph or film includes general consent, covering the particular act of sharing, as well as to the specific consent to the particular act of sharing. So, for example, if the complainant said, you can share this with anyone by putting it on our or their own OnlyFans account, that would be consent. However, if the complainant said, you can share this on our friend's WhatsApp group, but to nobody else, then that person sends it to somebody else or a different WhatsApp group, then there is no consent.
It is a defence for a person charged with an offence under subsection 1 to prove that the person had a reasonable excuse for sharing the photograph or film. Now, subsection 1 covers sharing without consent, but where there's no other intention. Now, I think that reasonable excuse could possibly cover sharing by mistake. For example, where somebody has accidentally sent the wrong picture to a WhatsApp group chat, and then they've tried to recall or delete it as quickly as possible.
Section 66C gives further exemptions to the offences of sharing intimate or deepfake intimate images of the complainant. So, if the photograph or film was taken in a place to where the public or a section of the public had or were permitted to have access, whether on payment or otherwise, that the complainant had no reasonable expectation of privacy from the photograph or film being taken, and that the complainant was, or the defendant reasonably believed that the complainant was, in the intimate state voluntarily. So this could possibly cover photographs taken at a nudist beach, or perhaps even in a strip club.
A person who shares a photograph or film which appears to show someone in an intimate state also does not commit an offence under 66B 1, 2 or 3 if the photograph or film had, or A, the defendant reasonably believes that the photograph or film had been previously publicly shared, and B, complainant had, or A, reasonably believes that the complainant had consented to the previous sharing. So I think this would possibly cover a porn actor's work which has previously been available publicly.
Subsection 4 deals with where the defendant shares a photograph or film which shows or appears to show the complainant in an intimate state, won't commit an offence if the complainant is under 16, the complainant lacks, or the defendant reasonably believes that the complainant lacks capacity to consent to the sharing of the photograph or film, and the photograph or film is then shared either with a healthcare professional acting in that capacity, or otherwise in connection with the care or treatment of the complainant by a healthcare professional. So, for example, sending a photograph of your child on Ask My GP in relation to a GP consultation.
Under subsection 5, a person who shares a photograph or film of this type does not commit an offence under section 66B(1) if the photograph or film is of a kind ordinarily shared between family and friends. So I think this would probably, it only covers the offence where there is no separate intent, and it would probably cover holiday snaps where somebody may be running around with less clothes on than they would be normally.
Subsection 6 deals with a defendant who threatens to share a photograph or film which shows or appears to show another person in an intimate state, wouldn't commit an offence if by virtue of that section they wouldn't commit an offence under section 66B 1, 2 or 3 by sharing the photograph or film in the circumstances conveyed by the threat. So just to explain that last exemption a little bit more, this provides a defence to a defendant who is alleged to have threatened to share a photograph contrary to section 66B subsection 4, which is threats to share with the intention that the person in the photograph or someone who knows that person will fear that the threat would be carried out. The defendant would not be guilty of the threats offence if, in the circumstances conveyed by the threat, it would put it in the exceptions listed for actual sharing. So that covers where the law is at now. It's pretty wide, covering the sharing of deepfake porn of another in various circumstances and with various intentions, including where there is no specific intention other than sharing without consent. One of the criticisms of the law is that whilst it criminalises the sharing of deepfake porn, it does nothing to criminalise the making of it or the simple possession of it. This may be because it's been drafted in a way which sets it alongside revenge porn. This is in comparison to indecent images of children, where it is illegal to possess, share, or make such material. Interestingly, the law which covers indecent images of children was drafted in such a way that it covered possible deepfakes, in that the law refers to any indecent photograph or pseudo-photograph of a child. This means that where the deepfake intimate image is of someone under the age of 18, it is already illegal to possess, share, or make under Section 1 of the Protection of Children Act 1978. Currently, the Criminal Justice Bill, it had been making its way through Parliament up until Parliament dissolved, and there were amendments that had been proposed which would criminalise the making of deepfake porn. So before we go into the proposed law, Lydia, how accessible is deepfake porn?
Making accessible deepfake porn is actually pretty accessible. There was a report released by Sensity in October 2020 about an AI-powered bot available via the messaging app Telegram. The bot allowed users to upload clothed pictures of women, and it would strip them to naked pictures, so what we've been calling nudifying. This wasn't expensive or difficult to access, with there being a free version and the ability to upgrade for $1.50. In July 2020, the bot service had 104,000 members across its 7 channels. The bot launched in July 2019, so that growth was in 1 year. A user poll on the Telegraph Central hub for this particular service showed that 63% of users were using the technology to strip pictures of women they knew. Analysis of images made shows that some of this was used to strip pictures of underage girls. A similar service, Deep Nude, was launched on the 23rd of June 2019. It was overwhelmed by 500,000 visitors and 95,000 downloads. The owners had to take the site offline only 5 days later. They sold the Deep Nude license on an online marketplace on July the 19th, 2019, and the software can now be found via open source repositories and torrenting sites. The Sensity report refers to deepfake videos like we see in Another Body, and found that in 2019, making one of these required moderate programming skills and a GPU, making these less accessible than photographs manipulated via Deep Nude and the Telegram channel. But that was in 2019, which is 5 years ago. Plus, in the film, we can see that via 4chan messenger boards, customers can commission someone with the required skills and equipment to create videos for them, and that this is relatively cheap and quick. Now, if you watch the BBC documentary Deepfake Porn, Could You Be Next?, you will see how easily the reporter of that show was able to download an app and create a deepfake of herself in just a few minutes. The technology to create a relatively realistic deepfake porn video is available on the App Store of your phone now. So Ella, if I were using Telegram to strip pictures of women I know today in the UK, would I be breaking the law?
No, not at the moment. If you were using it to strip pictures of women under the age of 18, you would be, but not if it was anyone over the age of 18.
And if I were going onto messaging sites and commissioning someone to make a deepfake porn video for me, would I be breaking the law?
Again, no.
And if I somehow had the technical ability to make that video myself, would I be breaking the law?
Not at the moment.
And if I knowingly have deepfake porn of someone on my phone or any other device, is that illegal?
No, not unless the person is under 18. Now, we are going to discuss how the law was going to change under the proposed Criminal Justice Bill 2024. However, since the government has been dissolved, this bill will not progress any further at this stage. However, this particular section of the bill, dealing with deepfake porn, was relatively uncontroversial, and it received cross-party support. So it's expected that the proposed changes in law dealing with deepfake porn will be resurrected under whatever the new government is. So we are going to discuss it, and if in the future there is a bill resurrected dealing with deepfake porn, we will do an update. And you never know, some of the issues we point out here may impact how the law is drafted in the future. To clarify, this was a proposed bill, not an act of Parliament. So it wasn't law when Parliament was dissolved. The law we've discussed so far comes from the Online Safety Act, which inserted new provisions into the Sexual Offences Act. And that's all the law that is in force now. But what we're about to go and discuss is not law at the moment.
So the bill, which as you've heard, is not progressing any further, but we expect to see this wording transplanted into whatever the new government want to do about deepfake porn. was the Criminal Justice Bill, and there was a proposed amendment as follows. It would have inserted into the Sexual Offences Act 66 AD, faking intimate photographs or films using digital technology, where 1, a person A commits an offence if A intentionally creates or designs using computer graphics or any other digital technology an image or film which appears to be a photograph or film of another person B in an intimate state for the purposes of A, sexual gratification, whether of themselves or another, B, causing alarm, distress or humiliation to B or any other person, or committing an offence under section 66A or 66B of the Sexual Offences Act 2003. Now, it is a defence to a charge under subsection 1 to prove that A, had a reasonable excuse for creating or designing the image or film, or that B consented to its creation. And a person who commits an offence under subsection 1 is liable on summary conviction to an imprisonment of term not exceeding the general limit in the magistrate's court or a fine or both, and on conviction or indictment to imprisonment of a term not exceeding 2 years. Now, that was a proposed amendment to a bill which would have added that as law into the Sexual Offences Act. And it would have been faking intimate photographs or films using digital technology contrary to section 66 AD of what, and it would have become of section 66 AD of the Sexual Offences Act. So you can see that this would have slotted into the Act immediately below the offences that we've already discussed.
What's immediately apparent from the proposed offences is that there is no simple offence like there is for sharing. And what I mean by that is that under the sharing offence, just sharing without consent but no other intent is an offence. Under this proposed law, simply making without consent but without any other intention wouldn't be a crime. The defendant has to have that specific intention behind the making of the image or film. And those intentions are sexual gratification, causing alarm, humiliation, or distress, or with an intention to commit an offence of revenge porn or cyberflashing. So if the defendant made it with the intention of sharing it, that would be an offence.
So looking then at the defences that are posed here, there is a reasonable excuse defence and a consent defence. For example, in the film Another Body, the filmmakers must have created their own deepfake porn because we see examples of the deepfake porn using the same actress's face, which has been deepfaked over Taylor's face. This must have been made by the filmmakers with the actress's consent, so that would be a defence, but they may also have a reasonable excuse. An example where a defendant might have a reasonable excuse but not consent could be if they thought they had consent, but in fact they didn't. For example, A is contacted by B saying, "This is a picture of me, please deepfake it onto some porn for me, you have my consent." So A makes the deepfake, but it later transpires that the person requesting had been hacked when the request was sent. So whilst it appeared that they had given consent, in fact, they hadn't. So what are issues that could arise when dealing with deepfaking cases?
One of the issues is deepfaked evidence. Is there a risk that a defendant with technological ability to make deepfaked porn could also make a deepfaked account from the complainant appearing to show consent? In 2020, a family law case was reported in which the mother had used deepfake technology to create evidence against the father. Analysis of the metadata under the recording proved it to be false. But would that routinely be ordered?
And how is create to be interpreted? Clearly, the person who makes the deepfake is caught within the law. But what about the customer who commissions someone to make it for them? And this is likely to be a proportion of users or makers of deepfakes, as we see in the Another Body film. And the specific wording of this provision as it currently was drafted could have been construed to exclude a customer.
Or could create be construed in the same way as making in cases of child pornography? In child pornography, making includes making by downloading from the internet. So broadly, just by viewing an image online, which automatically saves to your cache, you could be prosecuted for making child pornography, although you would be sentenced as someone who simply possesses it. Would that interpretation be carried over? If it were to be carried over, what if the viewer didn't know that the porn is deep-faked?
Are there potential jurisdictional issues? If the law is written to criminalise the person with the technical ability to make the video, and then that person is actually in Russia or the US, this law would not extend to them. So what do you think about this proposed law? We know that it's not actually a bill that's currently going ahead, but if this were to be then resurrected under a new government, what do you think, Ella?
It is concerning that the possession element isn't criminalised, but then when you reflect upon that, you then have to ask, well, how could that be policed? Given how advanced some of the deep fakes are, particularly the Obama deep fake, and indeed what we see on the film Another Body, how would that person know that they were watching a deep fake? I'm also slightly concerned that the definition of making it is perhaps too specific to the actual technical creator and doesn't include the customer who commissions it, which is what you've just raised, Lydia.
And I think, there's deepfake porn is actually a huge category online now. If you watch the BBC documentary, the one that's made by the BBC, not the Another Body one, they go into Mr. Deepfake, which is enormous, and in fact it specializes in this kind of porn. So how could that be policed in the future? There's also the issue that when deepfake porn is made, it actually takes the work of a porn actor, and that is stolen to create the deepfake. But there's no protection under the law at the moment for the person whose work has been stolen, although that probably is much more a civil matter. So what are the potential punishments that deepfake offenders can face, both now as the law as it is, and under what could be coming in new law?
So under the current law and the proposed law, the punishment for all offences other than simple sharing, it is 2 years custody as the maximum and a potential for a restraining order. Notification requirements would apply where the defendant is under 18, if they receive a term of imprisonment less than 12 months, or where the defendant is over 18 and they receive a prison sentence, a hospital order, or a community order of at least 12 months. The court can also make a sexual harm prevention order.
Yes, in fact, sorry, I think you just slightly slipped up there. So they would need, under 18, they would need to receive an imprisonment of at least 12 months.
Thank you for picking that up, Lydia. And I should say, for those that don't know what notification requirements are, they're when someone is required to be read on the sex offenders register, and they're required to notify the police of certain elements of their life.
So given where the law is now and where right now we're not sure about how the law is going to progress, do you think there's enough protection for complainants in deepfake pornography cases?
I think we could go slightly further to protect them, particularly in the absence of no punishment for the person who asks for the content to be created, because clearly they are the perpetrator with the malice intent against the complainant. And so I don't think that the law as it currently stands or what's proposed protects complainants in that regard.
Yeah, so that's that concern about with the definition of create being so specific to the person using the technology that the customers could possibly evade the law.
Yeah. Lydia, what do you think are the wider risks of this deepfake technology?
So beyond the creation of deepfake porn, I think there's a potential risk that we could see evidence across all sorts of cases being tampered with or even possibly created by those with the technical ability or the right contacts in all sorts of cases. And I think this is something we would potentially see expert evidence in the future. I mean, I remember around 20 years ago, we started to see what was called the CSI effect on criminal trials, where forensic evidence appeared to gain more weight as the public saw more of it being talked about on television. I can certainly imagine a time, possibly not even in too far future, where a defendant in a case dependent on CCTV would say, this is fake, I've been deep faked, I'm being framed. And would they then need to possibly look into that and get expert evidence to prove how genuine that CCTV is? And potentially we would have to see judicial comments being drafted to deal with that type of evidence and that type of allegation. But it's not all doom and gloom. What are some of the benefits of this technology?
Well, David Beckham fronts the Malaria Must Die campaign, which aims to rid the world of malaria. In order to make that campaign as accessible as possible, AI technology has been used to create deepfake videos of David Beckham describing the campaign and actions to be taken in multiple languages.
Also, Joshua Rivera, aka Depsman, was stabbed to death in Birmingham in September 2013, aged just 18. His mother is a knife crime campaigner, and she worked with Jamal Edwards using AI to create a new music video featuring her son, but released years after his death. The video uses deepfake technology to tell Depsman's story through a song called Life Cut Short, describing his childhood, his career, and the night that he died. That video has been used in youth clubs, schools, and prisons to discuss the dangers of knife crime. Now, if you do want to learn more about AI technology and deepfakes, please look into the work of Henry Iger. Links to relevant resources will be in the description below. They will include the BBC filmed Another Body, My AI Porn Nightmare, and Deepfake Porn, Could You Be Next, both on the iPlayer. And for more information on deepfakes in general, you can listen to the Beyond AI podcast, The Reality of Deepfake and Disinformation, and the BBC Radio 4 podcast, The Future Will Be Synthesized.
That concludes our exploration of deepfake porn and the criminal law in England and Wales. If this is something that is coming up in one of your cases, please get in touch with our clerks to discuss further with us, and do look into getting expert evidence if it is relevant.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.